Right now, 20% of the planet's entire oil supply is trapped. It's held hostage behind a microscopic stretch of water so small you could easily miss it on a map: the Strait of Hormuz. Every day, massive tankers carrying millions of barrels of fuel are supposed to squeeze through this 21-mile corridor, or at least they're supposed to. Overnight, military strikes and sea mines slammed the waterway shut, instantly turning it into the most dangerous place on the planet. It seems like this should be impossible. How is there no alternative route or backup plan? When global supply chains collapse this fast, the public immediately demands a workaround. We slice through mountains to build the Panama Canal. We terraformed the desert for the Suez. If human survival relies on a gap so narrow you can see across it, why can't the richest countries on Earth just dig a canal or go some other way around it? Well, because bypassing the Strait of Hormuz is a matter of much more than just moving dirt. And even if we pulled off the greatest construction project in human history, it wouldn't actually save us. There is a massive trap in the Persian Gulf, and it's just waiting for someone to fall in. The Persian Gulf is unlike anywhere else on the planet. Many of the countries surrounding it rank among the globe's biggest oil producers. Saudi Arabia, Iran, Iraq, and the UAE combine to pump tens of millions of barrels out of the sand every single day. It is an unfathomable amount of liquid energy, enough to keep continents warm, cargo fleets afloat, and the global grid online. In many ways, it's the beating heart of the modern world, but there's a fatal design flaw in the geography. Here's the catch. The Persian Gulf is essentially an enclosed basin with only one narrow passage leading in and out: the Strait of Hormuz itself. This sets it apart from many other gulfs across the globe. The Gulf of Mexico, for example, has multiple large openings and ways for ships to travel in and out of the sea. Between Florida and Cuba, for example, or between Mexico and Cuba, on into the Caribbean Sea and the Atlantic Ocean beyond. The Persian Gulf is very different. Here, if any ship, including those enormous oil tankers that keep the world economy working, wants to leave the area, it has to pass through the Strait of Hormuz. There are no exceptions, no alternatives, and that's what makes this such a strategic choke point. A choke point that is effectively responsible for 20% of the world's oil supply and 20% of the world's liquefied natural gas, the LNG trade too. To make matters worse, the strait isn't just narrow, it's also very tightly controlled. All vessels passing through this stretch of water have to travel along a pair of shipping lanes, one for outbound traffic and another for incoming traffic, each just 2 miles wide and separated by a 2-mile wide meridian. Iran knows these lanes well. It knows precisely which paths vessels will take, and it knows exactly how to disrupt them too. It doesn't even need to block the entire strait. It can simply focus on those slender shipping lanes, cutting off a huge fraction of trade literally overnight. And that's exactly what they did. Facing the threat of mines, missiles, drones, and more, many vessels stopped traveling through the Strait of Hormuz. Companies didn't want to take the risk of putting such expensive assets as well as the lives of dozens of crew members in jeopardy, and insurers were far less willing to offer coverage for any ships that intended to make the journey. As a result, oil prices skyrocketed, and entire continents' economies moved a big step closer to an unprecedented, once-in-a-generation crisis. You know, the kind that have happened at least 4 times in my own generation. And all because of one strip of water. Naturally, the first question is, so why can't we just go around it? After all, we've done similar things before. For centuries, geography held global trade hostage. In times gone by, ships would have to sail all the way around Africa, traveling literally thousands of miles in the process and spending weeks at sea just to carry cargo between Europe and Asia. Many ships and crews met their doom while attempting to navigate the infamous Cape of Good Hope at the southern edge of South Africa, where dangerous currents and bad weather combined to create deadly seafaring conditions. There was piracy, too. with countless cases of ships being attacked or hijacked and cargo stolen. But for centuries, this route was quite literally the only viable option for getting ships from one side of Africa to the other, until people did something about it. In 1869, after 10 long years of construction and terraforming the desert, the Suez Canal opened up, linking the Red Sea and the Mediterranean Sea, and providing a new passageway around the African continent. It cut thousands of miles and entire weeks off routes and delivered an unprecedented, incalculable boost to international trade. Today, the canal still handles around 12 to 14% of global trade. Over in the Americas, if ships wanted to get from the Atlantic Ocean to the Pacific, their only real option was to go all the way around South America. Ships would have to navigate the turbulent waters, high waves, and violent winds off the southern coast of South America in areas like Cape Horn and the Drake Passage. So, the United States cut straight across Central America, and in 1914, the Panama Canal opened up, instantly and dramatically reducing the time needed for ships to get from one side of the Americas to the other. History proves that if a maritime choke point threatens our survival, we can change an entire continent. So, with so much drama surrounding the Strait of Hormuz, why can't we do the same? The solution to the Persian Gulf crisis seems obvious, but the Middle East is immune to our engineering. If we look back at the Suez and Panama Canals, both of them were constructed in quite obvious locations. Before the Suez Canal was formed, there was a clear space for such a structure, as the northern end of the Red Sea was barely 100 miles away from the southern shores of the Mediterranean. Experts knew that it would take an incredible amount of time and money, but the idea of installing a canal here was at least a logical one. It was the same in Panama, where a mere 50 miles of land separated the Pacific Ocean on one side from the Caribbean Sea on the other. Even a casual observer could look at a map and see that this was the perfect place for a passage that would link one body of water with the other. The Persian Gulf is a totally different story. The Gulf is almost entirely enclosed. It's like a cul-de-sac with no way out except through the Strait of Hormuz and into the Gulf of Oman before flowing onward into the Arabian Sea. To the north sits the Caspian Sea, a landlocked body of water. No help there. And even to reach that, a canal would have to be constructed hundreds of miles across almost the entire length of Iran. Given why the strait is shut down right now, that's obviously not an option. To the west is the Mediterranean, but that too is much too far away to link up with the Persian Gulf. To connect the two, a canal would have to be built across numerous nations, most likely including Iraq, Jordan, and potentially Syria and Lebanon or Israel. It would take decades of work and incalculable amounts of money. So that also isn't a realistic choice. In the Sound, you have hundreds of miles of land, belonging to several different nations, the UAE, Saudi Arabia, Oman, and Yemen, all sitting between the Persian Gulf and the Gulf of Aden, or the Arabian Sea. But what if we wanted to try anyway? In September of 2015, a study proposed a 590-mile-long canal that would run from the Saudi coast just south of Qatar, crossing the country and over the border into Yemen before terminating on the Yemeni coast. The whole thing was estimated at $80 billion, and that was being optimistic. The study authors did note, though, that it could also include construction of new waterfront towns, cities, and resorts on either side of the canal's lengthy banks. Not much has been heard about it since, though, and it's probably gone the way of the Line and the Vegas Loop. No, it appears the entire Gulf is in effect a dead end. No alternate routes, no hidden passages, no slim strips of land separating it from another important body of water, and no obvious locations to construct a canal. Except for one geographically speaking microscopic loophole: the Musandam Peninsula. Arguably, the only semi-realistic proposition would be to construct a canal across this rugged, mountainous patch of land that extends out into the Strait of Hormuz and is divided between Oman and the UAE, with an Omani exclave as its northernmost point. At its narrowest, the Musandam Peninsula is only a few dozen miles wide. Just cut a trench through it, and you bypass the Iranian military completely. On paper, the project doesn't sound all that different from the likes of the Suez or Panama Canals, a relatively short waterway that would negate the influence and importance of the Strait of Hormuz, massively diminishing Iran's ability to stem the flow of oil into Europe and elsewhere. But this isn't the soft sand of Egypt where the Suez Canal was constructed, nor is it anything like Panama. The peninsula is a fortress of exceptionally steep, rocky, rugged mountains, some of which, like Jabal al-Harim, extend over 6,000 feet above sea level. These mountains absolutely cover the peninsula, which is why it's such a sparsely populated area, with only small settlements and villages dotted here and there in the shadows of the mountain peaks, along with the coastal oasis of Hassab, located at the peninsula's northern edge. To build a canal here wouldn't just be an astonishing feat of modern engineering, it would be a miracle. While it may seem like you would only need a 50 or 60 mile canal to get across the Musandam Peninsula, that's not how it would work in reality. Construction crews would have to plow through thick rock, extending for miles from one side of the peninsula to the other. Entire mountains would have to be erased from existence. Because of the harsh, inhospitable nature of the terrain, even if constructors found a way to work through it, they wouldn't be able to make a simple straight-line canal from one side to the other. They would have to turn left and right here and there in line with the natural contours of the area. A 50-mile bypass suddenly twists into a multi-hundred-mile labyrinth. That would make it much more complicated than, for example, the Suez Canal, which extends around 120 miles, or the Panama Canal, which is 50 miles long. And with complexity, obviously comes cost. The Suez Canal cost around $100 million, about $2 billion today. The US spent around $375 million on the construction of the Panama Canal, closer to $8 or $9 billion today. It also underwent an approximately $5.25 billion expansion project through the late 2000s into the 2010s. A canal across the Musandam Peninsula wouldn't just cost a few $billion. It wouldn't cost a few tens of billions. A project of this scale would come with a 12-figure sum, $100 billion, and that's at the very least. Some estimates say it could even go further, to $200 billion or beyond. And that's just the cost to build it. That number doesn't even factor in additional expenses like maintenance or security. And there's also a big elevation problem. This is not at all like in Egypt, where the land used to construct the Suez Canal was largely flat from one side to the other. Thanks to that, the Suez Canal doesn't need any locks, as there's no need to move vessels up and down at different locations. They just sail on through. A canal across Oman or the UAE would not work that way. Because the terrain changes so much, it would need a large and complex system of locks to help ships ascend and descend as they make the trip across. Locks need water, massive amounts of water. And this is one of the driest regions on the planet. That introduces a whole host of new challenges. Like, where would the water come from to fill the locks? How would it be maintained? How would the canal cope during periods of intense heat, sunshine, and drought? These aren't minor inconveniences or trivial issues, they're fundamental roadblocks that make the entire concept of a Musandam Canal feel more like a fairy tale than a realistic proposition. But just for discussion, let's say it did get built. Somehow all of the problems are solved, enough money is found, and years, or more likely decades of construction take place to, at last, link the Persian Gulf with the Gulf of Oman, giving ships a viable alternative to the Strait of Hormuz. There's still an issue that can bring the entire project to its knees, and that's security. Even if this canal, the only truly viable option, was made, it wouldn't actually be that much further from Iran than the Strait of Hormuz. And just like the strait, it would be relatively narrow, with predictable pathways that ships would have to follow to make it through to the other end. In other words, it would have many of the exact same weaknesses as the strait, and it would be just as easy to disrupt or block. Maybe even easier. All it would take is some well-placed missiles or even the threat of a missile launch to trigger yet another international crisis. All of a sudden, the exact same issues seen in the Strait of Hormuz would be felt across the Musandam Canal. Ships would once again be too frightened to travel along it. Insurers would, again, be unwilling to provide coverage. And 20% of the world's oil and LNG would once again be stuck in the Gulf, unable to reach the countries that count on it to power their industries and economies. The canal would be just another choke point, one that costs $100 billion or more to build, along with years of time, effort, and resources. When the math on a $100 billion canal breaks down, the public points to the question, why use ships at all? Why not just pump the oil over land through massive pipelines directly to the Red Sea, or other major bodies of water, or even into European countries directly? There is already an extensive network of pipelines like these in place, leading out of countries like Saudi Arabia and the UAE. The East-West crude oil pipeline, for example, otherwise known as the Petro Line, extends close to 750 miles from the eastern province of Saudi Arabia to the Red Sea. The only issue is that even the longest and largest of pipelines have their limitations. The very biggest only move oil at rates comparable to a handful of large tankers per day. And when conditions are good, there's over 100 tankers per day going through the strait. So they can't compete with the sheer volume of oil that ultra-large crude carrier tankers can carry. They're also very expensive to build, expand, and maintain, and are highly vulnerable to attacks or sabotage. They can help, but they can't be relied on to simply replace the oil sea trade. That's why the Strait of Hormuz is so valuable. Because despite some ambitious ideas and interesting hypothetical projects, there really is no alternative. So much of the world's oil trade and economy rests solely and entirely on this single stretch of water. And there's really very little we can do to change that. The Strait of Hormuz is more than just a route from one body of water to another. It's a geopolitical pressure point, a place where even minor regional tensions can have global repercussions, where people on the other side of the world can feel the ripples of war affecting their everyday lives in more ways than one, and where geography, more than any other factor, dictates what's possible and what isn't. So for all of mankind's many achievements, as long as the oil sits in the Persian Gulf, the global economy remains a hostage to geography. To understand more about what's happening today, go watch Why Every Arab State Fears Iran. And don't forget to subscribe and like the video too. It really does make a big difference. See you next time.